Hi everyone. We're going to go over the mock exam that you just wrote this last Saturday morning, and I'm going to share with you some of the expectations and requirements for each of the rubric points that the College Board has outlined for this specific essay. So first of all, the DBQ is something that you need to understand that you know how to do already. This is a review. You've been working on this all year. You just need to trust in the skills that you've developed and in your knowledge and understanding of the rubric points and show what you've learned this year. So we want to try to finesse our DBQ so that these guys this summer will be highly impressed with you, and you'll get a score of a 4 or a 5 on the AP exam. All right, so the prompt that you wrote about was evaluate the extent to which Christianity changed societies in Latin America in the period 1500 to 1800. So obviously the S word, syncretism, is going to be a big factor in this essay. The blending of different religious impulses of the different traditions is going to be a big deal, and a lot of the documents reference that. So let's just go through the rubric points, and then I'm going to show you some examples of whether or not you would have earned the point and whether or not you wouldn't have earned the point. So obviously contextualization, you want to describe a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. So you want to start, you generally want to start your contextualization with a during statement which requires that you bring in a time period. You've got to bring in some kind of historical event or process or development that sets the stage for the events that you're going to be writing about or the documents that you're going to be analyzing. It can't just be a recitation of what the argument is in your thesis. It has to be something broader. It could be something that happened immediately prior to the events, during the events. I would stay away from after the events, but before or during are good things to think about for your contextualization. So to earn the point, as it says, the essay has to describe a context relevant to how Christianity affected Latin America. So be thinking about what's going on in the world, in Europe or in the Americas or anywhere else that might influence the processes and the events that are taking place in the Americas. So here are some examples that the College Board has given for context. If you included anything having to do with the building of New Spain or the Treaty of Tordesillas or the Portuguese-Spanish colonial empires, anything along those lines, you probably would have gotten contextualization. Also, the Atlantic system, the development of triangular trade, mercantilist activities between the old world and the new, those are all good contexts for what's taking place with regard to the spread of Christianity in Latin America. And then also maybe even the competition between Catholicism and Protestantism during this time period. That also might have been a good context to set up for your essay. Other examples, the Columbian Exchange, the Great Dying, some of the documents talked about enslaved Amerindians. Well, what happens after smallpox comes in and wipes them out? You might talk about how the transatlantic slave trade grew as a result of that. That would be an event afterward, but that could maybe get you contextualization. The role of the church in trying to spread, starting with the Reconquista in Spain and Isabella and Ferdinand and the discovery of the Americas. One of the goals is to spread Catholicism, to spread the church teachings, to spread the one true faith, as they argued. The Inquisition might have been the Spanish Inquisition started by Isabella might be a good context as well, because the processes of getting Muslims and Jews to convert was also something that you saw in the Americas. You saw that play out in the Americas, where people were put on trial for practicing their indigenous beliefs and indigenous faith. So that's a fantastic contextualization. I don't know how much you're going to get Habsburgian domains in Europe. I mean, that's more AP Euro, but if you knew that. So here's an example of acceptable contextualization. During the 16th century, the methods Spanish used to coerce natives to relinquish their cultural tradition largely mirrored the techniques used in Spain to pressure Jews and Muslims. who had converted by name, nominally converted, but they still practiced their religion in secret. So that's almost kind of a syncretic, it's almost the same parallel process that's going on, but it's really good context because that was the motive, that was the plan of the Spanish, was to get everybody to convert and save their souls. Okay, and obviously we're going to continue to start our contextualization statement at the beginning of your introduction paragraph with the word during. I think that will help you remember to establish place and time, so don't forget contextualization and during. All right, let's move on to thesis. So basically, when you're crafting your thesis, you need to be thinking about a couple of things. You're going to start with the phrase or the word although. You're going to establish what your groupings are going to be in your thesis, right? Whether it's 2 or 3 groups, you need to provide a roadmap to the reader. Also, importantly, you want to make sure that you're incorporating terms from the prompt, terms from the prompt in your response. That will make sure that you're responding directly to the exact question. Throughout the year, those of you that did not include terms from the prompt sometimes got off course, and you didn't really, answer the prompt thoroughly or explicitly, which is required to earn this point. So you can't just you need to use terms from the prompt, but you can't just recite or regurgitate what the question is. You actually have to answer the question. And if I could leave you with anything about thesis point on this last week here before the AP exam, is to answer the question that is being asked. Answer the question that is being asked. All the other stuff, the in that's and such as's and all those, is not as important as answering the question. So make sure you're doing that when you craft your thesis. Okay? So if the prompt is evaluate the extent to which Christianity changed societies in Latin America, you need to make sure you have Christianity changed societies in Latin America somewhere in your response, in your thesis. So here we go. It says, here's an example of an acceptable thesis provided by the College Board. Obviously, it doesn't start with although, but here's what they would have counted. The arrival of Christianity in the Americas significantly changed indigenous societies because it attracted converts and forced many people to continue to practice their indigenous beliefs in secret. So that would have been an answer to the question, how did it change societies in Latin America? Or this one would also be acceptable. The arrival of Christianity in the Americas significantly changed indigenous societies in Latin America because it led to the development of syncretic cultures. So in both of these, what you can see is they are using specific terms from the prompt. Significantly changed societies, Christianity significantly changed societies. So you need to make sure you're doing that when you write your essay next Thursday. Or finally, Christianity greatly changed Latin American societies because European political authorities were willing to use repression to try and suppress all aspects of indigenous culture. All of those would have earned the point. All of those are good examples of a thesis statement. Here would be an example of an unacceptable thesis. The arrival of Christianity changed Latin American society significantly. That happened this year in some of the essays that I read. You're just restating or regurgitating the prompt without really answering it. So make sure you're doing more than that. Or the arrival of Christianity changed Latin American societies because the Inquisition eliminated all native religious beliefs. Well, that's factually incorrect, and it's not really showing exactly what the documents are talking about. So both of those would not have earned the point. Okay, let's move on to documents. You're going to be given 7 documents. If you use at least 5 of those documents to help, your argument or help defend your answer to the prompt, you can earn a point. Okay, you have to do more than just quote or paraphrase. In fact, you never, ever want to quote the documents. And you have to do more than just paraphrase them. You have to show how those documents are backing up your argument. They have to basically tie back to your topic sentence. What is it that you're trying to show the reader? What is it you're trying to prove? Okay, if all you do is say document 2 says, document 4 says, document 5 says, they're not going to give you credit for using the documents. So if you do that successfully for at least 5 of the 7 documents, you will get a point on the DBQ. Now, we don't want to just use 5 documents. We want to use all 7, right? So if you use all 7, and you're using them effectively as evidence in your essay, you're going to earn a second point. So you'll get 2 points. So here's an example of describing the content of a document. This is for document 3 that you wrote about. The Catholic priest Jacinto de la Serna describes how Amerindians continue to practice their ancient religious traditions while simultaneously venerating Jesus and Mary, thereby joining light with darkness. So that's a good description of the document, or what the content of the document is all about, but it doesn't have anything to do with how Christianity changed societies in Latin America. So there's no reference to what the argument is. So here's an example. If you want to get that second point, if you want to use all the documents and to try to use the meaning of the document to prove your argument, here would be an example of supporting an argument with the content of a document. Fabian de Vargas's court testimony, which described how many native peoples continue to practice animal sacrifice and other traditional rituals while also adopting Christian practices, illustrates that the most significant change Christianity introduced into Latin American societies was the emergence of syncretic religions. Okay, so not only does this writer talk about the content of the document, here's what I want to leave you with. Not only does he talk about the content of the document, he's also using it as evidence to prove his point. So very well done, whoever you are who took this exam. All right. So another point, we've talked about thesis, we talked about contextualization, we've talked about document usage. That's 4 of the points there, 4 of the 7 points. Another point you can earn if you bring in a couple of pieces of historical evidence not mentioned or referenced or alluded to in any of the documents. If it's something that you know, that you've learned in your studies of world history, that you can bring in to kind of buttress or support the documents. If you do that twice in your essay, the College Board will award you an extra point there for your essay. So you can't double dip. It can't be anything in your contextualization paragraph. It can't be anything else referenced anywhere in your essay. But if you do it as a support, an extra sentence or two talking about how another event or another historical development, which is similar to something used in the documents, or an event that happened as a result of something that happened in the documents, tying in some kind of outside evidence, showing that you do understand or you do have some knowledge of history beyond the documents, they'll reward you for that. So here would be an example of an acceptable use of an additional piece of his specific historical evidence. Spanish efforts to bind the native peoples of Mexico to the Christian faith were helped significantly by the emergence of the cult of the Virgin of Guadalupe. According to the story, the Virgin Mary appeared to a Native American man from Mexico, Juan Diego, soon after the Spanish conquest. The church quickly endorsed the story of the Virgin of Guadalupe, realizing how important it could be in the process of winning the natives' hearts and minds. All right, so that's a kind of an additional fact. You may have known that, you may have not have known that, but this person included that. And of course, there's countless pieces of outside historical evidence that you could incorporate. So just trust what you understand or what you know. Think about the context or the time period that you're writing in. What were some things that were going on in Latin America, in Europe, in those places, in the Atlantic trade system that you could bring in and use in your essay. So that's a really easy point to get. So don't forget to do that a couple of times. It doesn't require a lot of high-level analysis. You just have to bring in some outside evidence. And then finally, the College Board requires that you do some kind of analysis of the documents, some kind of reasoning. And the way that I've taught you to do this year is through the process of corroboration, where you're essentially, just like a historian would, you're essentially looking for multiple pieces of evidence that would corroborate or support an idea, a truth, a historical fact, right? And so you basically, what you want to do with this point is you want to put two documents in a conversation with each other. You want to put the documents in a conversation with each other. Other than just using the, describing the content, saying how this is evidence, you also have to, compare, if you will, one document with another and show how they both support or corroborate a specific idea. So here's what that would look like. First of all, a good way to start this would be with the word despite. And it's helpful to find a couple of different documents that maybe the sources or the authors have two different